Hi, welcome to this week's episode of In the Hoods. This week I'm going to be talking about Turtle Bay and its sub-neighborhood of Sutton Place and its further sub-neighborhood of Beekman Place. It really depends who you speak with. Turtle Bay officially goes from 43rd Street to 53rd Street and Lexington Avenue to the East River. Sutton Place goes from 53rd Street north to 59th Street, and then hidden in there is Beekman Place, which is one street that runs from, I believe it is 51st Street to 2 blocks to 49th Street, and that's Beekman Place. The area is interesting. Turtle Bay, as one might guess from its name, at one point in the 1700s was actually a bay, a cove in the East River with turtles. It was an area that was very pastoral, like most of New York. It had farms, but because of the East River and the need for both transportation and water power, the area along the river was developed, and it really was overdeveloped, filling in the cove in the early to mid 1800s. There were slaughterhouses there, there were breweries there were laundries there. It was a big industrial area. And there were coal-fired plants there. It was very dirty and very industrial. Like so many industrial neighborhoods, they needed people to work there. So there were a number of tenements in this area in the 1800s to house the workers for this industrial area. It was not considered one of the better areas to live. People were poor, there was a lot of violence, it was sketchy at best. After the Civil War, people started to build brownstones in the area, moving kind of closer to Lexington Avenue. Residents started coming into the area. And then in the early 1900s, the 1920s, Tudor City was built, which extended up to 43rd Street, and it kind of crosses 42nd Street. So it came into Turtle Bay, and that really changed the demographic of the area considerably. And then in the 1940s, the UN was built, and although many Turtle Bay residents apparently opposed it, it was built. And that further changed the neighborhood. Then you had diplomats and people who worked for consulates coming into the area who all needed housing. And you started seeing the development of both rental housing and condominium housing in the area. There are a few older apartment buildings that are quite famous. There are two kind of Baroque style apartment buildings, low buildings on East 44th Street that were famous for having people pass through. Marilyn Monroe is reputed to have lived there. I myself lived in one of them when I came back from college. I couch surfed on a friend's couch in this studio apartment. We won't talk about what year that was, but it's an interesting area because it's very international. It's largely residential, except when you get east of Lexington, except for the UN and for the consulates. The other building that the area is very famous for is the Chrysler Building, which sits on 43rd to 42nd Street on Lexington Avenue. As you go north and you hit 53rd Street, really from 53rd Street on to 59th Street is Sutton Place. Sutton Place is a residential area. It's a little neighborhood that is very self-contained. It has both brownstones or townhouse housing, some very beautiful old townhouses, and it also has apartment housing, both rental and cooperative. Along 57th Street, there's some old co-ops. I would describe Sutton Place as being an area which is really representative of kind of tatty gentility. It's older and it's not quite as fashionable as it used to be to live in Sutton Place. It used to be considered very fashionable. Then you have your sub neighborhood of Beekman Place, which Beekman Place is really surrounds a street, Beekman Street, which runs north and south between 49th Street and 51st Street. And Beekman Place consists of the buildings on either side of this street, and maybe some of the surrounding buildings can call themselves Beekman Place too. But it's famous for being a WASP enclave. Some of the wealthiest New Yorkers lived in Beekman Place. Rockefellers lived in Beekman Place. J.P. Morgan's family or ancestors lived in Beekman Place. So this is an area that's very prestigious. One Beekman Place is a beautiful cooperative building that hangs right over the cliff that Beekman Place runs along and looks over the East River. It's truly lovely. And when you're in Beekman Place, don't really feel as though you're in New York City.